Good afternoon. I'm Brian Tier, come to you from Green Mountain Missionary Baptist Church. Thank you for watching our Wednesday afternoon Bible study. We're going to be looking at the book of Mark, chapter 12. You can begin turning there, as well as I want you to look at James chapter 1. That's actually where I'm going to start off reading, is James chapter 1. But you can go ahead and find both of those passages while we're getting into the introduction. I'm coming to you from a remote location today, not out of my office this afternoon. Actually out working, so having to set up in a remote location. Hopefully that's okay and you can hear me okay and everything. It's one of the great things about having the video, I guess, is that I can do this from just about anywhere. And but anyway, we're going to continue our study through the book of Mark, and we have been noticing over the last passage in chapters 10, 11, and 12 that Jesus has been getting a lot of questions about his authority and what he had the authority to do and what he had the authority not to do. And we found that he has the authority in heaven and earth and even beneath the earth. Hopefully you've come away with that and understand that Jesus is the only one that could pay for our sin debt. Anyone could die on a cross, and indeed there's been many people die on a cross and been sacrificed in that way and been whipped and beat. There's been many people done that, but there's only one person that could take away our sin debt, and that's Jesus Christ. And he is the one that has all authority. He is all, the prophet, the priest, and the king, as we studied about in Psalm chapter 110, or Psalm 110. So this demonstrates his authority over everything, heaven and earth. And in him giving the answers to the questions that he did, it demonstrated it as well, his authority, his knowledge of the scriptures, and knowing what we should do, and the reason why he was able to go in the temple and overturn the tables and tell them that his father's house is supposed to be a house of prayer. So all of these things come down to this, and this is something that I believe that he was really trying to stress to his disciples, because look, and this is what we're going to be talking about today. The Pharisees and the scribes and those guys were very highly educated. They wore long robes. They did certain things, that made them have the airs of people that had authority. Jesus didn't. John the Baptist didn't. Remember what John the Baptist wore whenever he was out there in the wilderness? He was wearing, camel's hair, and he had a leather girdle on, and he was eating locusts and wild honey and all kinds of stuff. Just a real natural man, right, is what you kind of think about with John the Baptist being out there preaching on the river bank of the Jordan, baptizing those guys. You really wouldn't, but if you had John the Baptist standing there and you had Jesus standing there, and then you had these scribes and Pharisees and you had the priests wearing their priestly garb and all this kind of stuff, you'd say, if you were to rank them just by how they looked, where do you think Jesus and John the Baptist would stand in the ranking system? Okay, yeah, right. Maybe a little lower, right? You'd have the high priest standing there with his garments on that we read about in the book of Exodus and the things that he wore. You'd think about the scribes and the Pharisees and their long robes with their tassels and all that kind of stuff. We're going to read about that today, and how that they demanded people call them father or call them rabbi and stuff like that. And Jesus did not have that same sort of airs about him. Even though that he was the master, even though that he was God, he did not demand people to do that. And so it would have been really something. And people, even being a pastor, sometimes, I'm not wearing my suit and tie today. I always try to look, presentable and everything when I'm doing the videos, or if I'm at church or what have you, try to look presentable and everything and professional. I think that we should be respectful of the office that we hold. But that's not what it's all about, is it? I mean, if you come by there and I'm mowing the yard, I'm probably not going to, I may be in my Carhartts, or something, maybe some shorts or something and flip-flops. But that's not where we get our authority from in what we wear. Our authority doesn't come from the title that we have. You can have a title 10 miles long, but if you're no good, you're just not any good. That's all that there is to it. And so that's what Jesus wanted his disciples to see here. And it wasn't that he didn't want people to call them apostles or call them these sort of things, but he didn't want that to be all that they were, is just a title or just demanding to be in a certain place or something like that. And that's what I wanted, and this is what he wanted them to walk away with here, is that the one that demands the titles and things is Jesus. He's the one that we should title, right? He should be getting the respect that we have, and the honor that we have, the worship that we have. No man on this earth. And so that's the way that he wanted it to be. That's the way that it should be. And so whenever people start talking about what true religion is, and if religion is any good, people will say, you know what, religion is bad and all this kind of stuff, and they don't go ahead and think about what they're really saying. But there's nothing wrong with religion as long as it's pure religion. It's true religion. If it's the religion that Jesus promoted, then it will be good and it will be helpful. It will be something that not only you can use at church, but hopefully you can use all week long. And that's where we need it, right? We need religion not just at church. We don't need just to have it when we're sitting with everyone else that is a believer like we are. We need religion everywhere that we go. But it needs to be pure religion, and what does that look like? And that's what I want us to see today. I want us to see what false religion looks like. I want us to see what pure religion or true religion looks like. I want to start with James here. James chapter 1. Look at verses 26 and 27 of James chapter 1. These are good verses maybe to underline, because when people are talking about religion again, they usually don't have the right idea of what it's talking about. But here it is. James chapter 1 verse 26, it says, "If any man among you seem to be religious, and bridleth not his tongue, he deceiveth his own heart. This man's religion is vain." Okay, so he starts off talking about what? A vain religion, and that's one that's all talk. And there's nothing that goes along with it. But what does pure religion look like? We know what all talk looks like, okay? It's not just the sermon that's preached on Sunday, is it? That shouldn't be all of the sermon that you see from me. The sermons that you see from me are not just the things that I say, but also what? Hopefully the things that I do, right? And that's what we're shooting for. Verse 27 says, and that's what it says, "Pure religion and undefiled before God and the Father is this." Okay, so this is what it is before God the Father. "To visit the fatherless and widows in their affliction, and to keep himself unspotted from the world." Now, that doesn't really sound a lot like religion today, but that's what it really is supposed to be like, right? If we want to have pure religion, if you want to truly serve God, if you want to truly worship God, how do you do that? It's not in just the things that you say, but it's in the things that you do. Okay, this is about giving to the fatherless and widows, right? To visit the fatherless and the widows. And this just doesn't mean to visit with them. It also means to help them in their time of need, doesn't it? Okay, and so this is really going to come home whenever we study our next passage. So I want you to really think about what's said here. So the fatherless, those are orphans, right? People that are fatherless are orphans. So those that don't have mother or father or someone to take care of them, those are people that we need to pour into and help them in their time of need. Widows as well, people that don't have an outside income coming in that can sustain them. Some people do have a little bit, maybe some Social Security or something, but they don't have enough to sustain what their needs are. And we need to really be thinking about as a church, when we see problems like that come up, we need to be the first ones on the scene to try to help those folks out. And that's when we're really showing our true religion. Now, who are these people? These are people that cannot help themselves, and these are also people that cannot help you back. Are you hearing me? These are people that can't help you back. You're doing it out of a selfless heart, because you're giving to them knowing that they can't give you anything in return. Now, they may try and they may do some, okay? But whenever we're giving to them, we're doing it out of a heart, and this is the way that all of our giving should be. It's not so that we can get something in return. It's because of all that has been done for us. What has been done for us? What generosity has God poured out on you? Do you have food enough to eat each and every day? Do you have clothing on your back? Maybe more than one suit of clothing? Some of us have got multiples upon multiples upon multiples. No, it doesn't stutter there. That's what I said, right? We have more than enough, don't we? Do we have a roof over our head? Yeah, some of us have a very nice roof over our head. We have plenty. Okay, God has taken very good care of us in our needs, the needs that we have. There's a lot of people out there, though, that have that are very needy, and especially right now and proceeding forward, I've got to imagine with 30-something million people that are out of work right now, that you may run across a few that need help. And if you can't help them yourself, then definitely let the church know so that we can help. And we've already tried to do that during this coronavirus time. But even beyond that, I don't think hadn't heard anybody say, let's not help somebody. Every time that we've ever brought somebody up that's needed help, all I hear is, yeah, let's do it. And that's what I like to hear. And that's the way that it should be, shouldn't it? Is that we should be looking and reaching out to those that are in need. The Lord has put our church in a very good situation. And I've never known of us really having a true need at the church for anything financially that God hasn't just overabundantly provided for us with. And so I don't think that there would ever be anybody that would ever say anything about helping someone else out. Maybe the amount or something like that might be, but never whether we are or not. I've always heard a positive to that. And I thank God for that. I thank God for you guys being so generous. And that's the way that we should be. That's what true religion or pure religion looks like. Helping people that may not be able to come and drop a load into the offering plate. That's not what we're looking for whenever we're giving. We're looking at giving because God has given to us. All right? And so that's what pure religion is. And to keep himself, it says, the widows in their affliction, and to keep himself unspotted from the world. So to keep ourselves morally pure as well, unspotted from the world, to keep ourselves away from the world is something that we need to also hold on to, and that's part of being pure in our religion, okay, or having a pure religion. Now let's get into our text this afternoon, Mark chapter 12. Mark chapter 12. Some of these verses are pretty near and dear to my heart. The first part is talking about this religious deal, but actually taking this whole group here, this whole group of verses, I think is going to be also pretty satisfying to you as well. So let's look at this. Verse 38 is where we're going to begin. So he's going to start off talking about what false religion looks like, things that we need to be aware of, stuff that the disciples need to be aware of. Because after Jesus leaves, he doesn't want them to revert to what these scribes and Pharisees are. Okay? He's wanting them to be different. He wants our churches to look different than what the scribes and Pharisees did during his day. He didn't want it just to be a bunch of titles. He didn't want it just to be a bunch of robes. He didn't just want it to be a bunch of what looks to be good. It's nice to have a nice looking church building. It's nice to have pews, and it's nice to have this and that. But brothers and sisters, if that's all our church is, then it's nothing. If all it is a bunch of suits and ties and all that kind of stuff, it's nothing. That's not what God's looking for. God is looking for something deeper than that, something that's heartfelt whenever we give and the things that we do. Whenever I get up to preach, or you get up to teach, or you get up to give, or you get up to do anything for the work of the Lord, that we're not doing it out of a heart that says, I have to do it, or I want to look good before everyone else. No, we're not. We shouldn't be concerned about that. What we should be concerned about is looking good before Almighty God, okay, and doing things because that He loves us so much. As we talked about last time, that we are bound by love. The reason why that we do what we do is because of the love that we have for Jesus Christ, not because that we're forced into it or because the law constrains us, but the love of God constrains us. The love of Christ constrains us. Mark chapter 12, verse 38, and he said unto them in his doctrine. And doctrine is another word for teaching, okay? Doctrine and teaching means the same thing. So in his teaching, when Jesus was teaching them, he says, beware of the scribes, which love to go in lone clothing and love salutations in the markets, and the chief seats in the synagogues, and the uppermost rooms at feast. Okay? So he says first, beware of the scribes. Now the scribes were the ones that were responsible for copying the scriptures. They knew the scriptures inside and out, but they also wanted to be known for it. Okay? And the way that they would be known for it is they wore a huge badge that says, hey, I'm a scribe. No, it wasn't like that, but it was similar. They wore robes. Okay? And this is the reason why that a lot of pastors, including myself, refuse to wear robes and stuff like that, is not because that there's necessarily anything with robes, but sometimes we get tied to that kind of stuff, and we expect certain errors to be done because that we're wearing the robes. Brothers and sisters, if you can't respect me for being the pastor and for who I am without whatever that I'm wearing, then you need to have a little chat with me, okay, and say this is the reason why that we can't respect you, because it should never be because of what someone wears. That's, again, think about Jesus and John the Baptist and the things that they wore in comparison to the scribes, the Pharisees, and those guys. They were wearing robes and everything. John the Baptist, Jesus were wearing regular, everyday attire. It's not that, again, that, whenever I come to church, I like to look professional. I like to wear a jacket and tie most of the time whenever I'm preaching or teaching, even. And even though I've been working today, I wanted to put a button-up shirt on because, I think that it's good to look professional. It's good to be professional in what we're doing because this is God's word that we're doing. This is God's work that we're doing. And it's important for us to have, to be presentable, and I think that we should. But again, think about where Jesus' disciples had come from. They were fishermen. They were regular, everyday men. And when they would go into these synagogues and everything, the reason why the only thing that they had to respect about these guys is how they looked. And Jesus wanted it to be more than that. More than that. It's not wrong to wear a shirt and tie, but let me tell you something, or a suit and tie, but let me tell you something, if that's the only reason why that you respect me or respect the office of a pastor, then you've got the wrong idea about it. There should be more to it than that. You can respect people, if a plumber comes to your house, he's probably not going to be wearing a suit and tie. He's going to be wearing whatever clothes that are befitting to him. But you know what? You may have respect for him because of the job that he does, right? Not because of what he's wearing, but because of what he's doing. And that's the way that it's supposed to be. We have to first look, and this is very hard for us because, boy, we like to look on the outward appearance, don't we? But God has always said, all the way through his word, that God doesn't look on the outward appearance. God looks on the heart. That's where it starts. Okay? These guys love to be seen. They love to be seen. Okay? Isn't that what it says? Love to have the loan clothing. They love salutations in the marketplaces. Another good passage that goes along with this is Matthew chapter 23. I don't think I'll have time to look over there today. But go ahead and read that because they wanted to be called Father, they wanted to be called Rabbi, and all of these kinds of things. And Jesus says, don't look for people to call you this stuff. Don't demand that they call you this stuff. Okay? If you want to call me pastor, you can call me pastor, but I'm not going to demand it. It's not a demand. I'm not going to demand it. You do it because that you feel like that's the respect that is needed, but you don't have to do it because that you think that I'm not going to demand that you do it. Now, I should never do that. And that's now when it comes to my kids, I'll have them be respectful and call people by the titles that they're supposed to because that's the way I want to train them up to be. But what he's saying here is that you don't have to demand. You should not demand people if you're in that position to do that. Okay? So hopefully you can figure that out a little bit. Just think on it for a little bit. Okay? Don't tune me out here. Because isn't that what Jesus is saying here? They love the salutations. People that love that stuff, and that's what they're doing it for, man, and they're in the wrong business. They're doing it for the wrong reason. And he did not want his apostles, his disciples, to do that. And who more than his disciples deserved to have respect and everything? They hung out with Jesus for 3.5 years when nobody else would. John came up there and took his mother from him whenever he was up there on the cross. And Jesus told him, you take care of my mom. I mean, these guys deserved the respect. They deserved the accolades. But he says, don't you go looking for it. Don't you go looking for it. You don't have to wear a name tag that says, hey, I'm the apostle or whatever. You just do the work of the Lord. Allow the Lord to get the credit. He's the one that's supposed to get the credit anyway, isn't he? Not me, not you. It's God. This stuff is supposed to reflect back on him and on his work. That's what we're here for. I'm not here for a title or for a name. I'm here to serve the Lord. And that's what you're supposed to be here for too, all of us. So false religion loves to be seen. They want to be recognized. Okay, notice that they also, in verse 39, they want the chief seats at the synagogues and the uppermost rooms at the feast. You know how it is at churches where they have the seats, and we don't do this at Green Mountain. I usually sit in the front, but sometimes on the front row, but it's usually because it's a vacant seat to sit in. But sometimes they'll have like pastors' chairs on either side. Again, there's nothing wrong with that if that's the way the church wants to respect them, but a pastor doesn't need to demand it, that he has to sit up front. He's going to sit up above everyone else. You shouldn't demand it. The Proverbs teaches us that. Never ask to be seated in a place that's in a high position. If you've been asked to come there, wait till you're asked to come up before you just go and do something, okay? And so the respect should be earned, not just expected. All right. So that's what he's trying to teach his disciples here. They wanted the uppermost rooms at the feast and at the synagogues. And again, there's nothing wrong with having the uppermost seats, but you need to be invited there, not demand your way in. All right. And then verse 40, which devour widows' houses, and for pretense make long prayers, these shall receive greater damnation. All right, and so they do two other things here. The first one is they devour widows' houses. Now, the way that these guys lived was on contributions of people. And what they were doing is they were going to the widows that could not afford to be feeding them anyway, and they were just devouring their houses so that the widows had nothing. Now, in the next set of passages here, we're going to be reading about a widow that basically has nothing. And you kind of have to wonder if these two go together, right? Whether the widow that we're going to be talking about that's giving everything that she has, which equals 2 mites, which was like 1/64th of a day's wages. All right, and so she had very, very little to begin with. And yet these scribes were demanding everything that they had. They were devouring their houses. These widows had nothing to begin with, but the scribes were taking everything and demanding everything that they had. And that's not the way that it's supposed to be, brothers and sisters. I know of a lot of widows. I know of a lot of people that are in a lot more needy situation than I am, that are good, very good, and very generous. But they should be doing that out of their hearts, not because that I'm somehow beating them with a rod saying that you need to give to the church or whatever. They don't require. It's not required of them to give any more than what it's required for any of us to give. Okay, it doesn't matter what position or what state that you're in. You have the same opportunity and the same thing. You should be giving the same way. All of us should be giving the same way. We'll talk about that in just a second. But I just want you to see how that these guys were devouring it. And I was just watching a video the other day on a televangelist, and I won't mention his name, but how that he made millions of dollars begging for money on TV and most of the money that he got was from people that had true needs. And he was living in a very, very nice house, very nice cars, and an airplane and all this kind of stuff. And again, there's nothing wrong with having all of that stuff if God provides that for you. But where he was getting it and how he was getting it is a total different thing. And so we need to be watchful for that, okay? Sometimes it's easy to prey on those that actually have needs. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can look in our world today and see that that's the way that it is. The biggest taxation that we have going on the poor today is called the lottery. It's called the lottery, okay? And it's a self-inflicted tax. But more poor people give to that tax than just about anyone else. There's not wealthy people don't play the lottery. It's poor people that do, people that can't afford to be playing it in the first place. And you may as well go out in your backyard and start digging for gold as opposed to trying to win the lottery. It's not going to happen. So, but anyway, that being set aside, but you see, what I'm saying is that sometimes we try, and even our government tries to prey on those that are in the worst condition. Okay, and that's not what churches are all about. That's not what we're all about. True religion is not about that. And that's what Jesus is saying here. These guys were going after these widows and everything, and that doesn't need to happen. Also, for pretense or for pretend, they make long prayers. They pray a lot, and you see them praying, you hear them praying all over the place, and yet they were just doing it out of pretense. These guys didn't mean what they were saying. And whenever I read that, I think about the Pharisee. Remember the Pharisee and the publican that were praying in the temple? And it says the Pharisee was talking about how that he was glad he wasn't like the publican and that he fasted and he did all of these kinds of things. Everything that he was saying made himself look good, and what had nothing to do with God had nothing to do with praying for his fellow man. And then the publican gets up there to pray, and he says, Lord, be merciful to me, the sinner. All he could do is come and confess his sins before God. And that's the way our prayer should be. So, however, whenever we pray, no matter if it's a long prayer or a short prayer, it doesn't need to be out of pretense or pretend. It needs to come from the heart. And again, we're talking about what pure or true religion looks like. It looks like prayers that come from the heart. Okay, not something that's on a shoestring or just made up, or something that we've prayed 1,000 times before. This is a conversation that we have. Sometimes when we pray to God, our prayers also sound exactly the same. They sound exactly the same every time. And we need to be aware of that. We need to think about it whenever we're praying before God. And you wouldn't have a conversation with somebody every day that sounded exactly the same, would you? I don't think that God appreciates that either. We need to change it up a little bit. We need to have a conversation with Him. Okay, and usually things that come from the heart aren't stuff that we've just got. What am I trying to say? Memorized stuff that we have memorized, but stuff that is actually really true and good. Okay. All right, and he says with these they're going to receive the greater damnation. In other words, they're not getting any closer to heaven by doing these things. All right, let's look on here as our time marches on. Verse 41, it says, And Jesus sat over against the treasury, and beheld how the people cast money into the treasury. And many that were rich cast in much. And when a certain poor widow, she threw in 2 mites, which make a farthing. And he called unto him his disciples, and saith unto them, Verily, verily, I say unto you, that this poor widow hath cast more in than all they which have cast into the treasury. And all they that did cast in their abundance, but she of her want did cast in all that she had, even all her living. Okay, so we have a stark contrast here, don't we, with religion. So first we have the scribes. They have these long robes on. They want to be called a certain title. They want to have all these salutations and all this kind of stuff. They want to have these long prayers. They want you to allow them to be in the top places and the top positions and all this kind of stuff. And then you have the second woman, a widow woman. Widow women in those days did not have much money to begin with. They usually did not have a true income coming in of any kind. They did not have like Social Security or anything like that. And so these ladies were definitely poor. A lot of times they would have to read the book of Ruth, and you'll find out how it looked for them. But they would have to go and glean the fields after everybody else was done. After the guy had gotten through gleaning his field, they would go out there and get whatever was left over. Okay? And so they were basically living off of the leftovers. And so typically they didn't have much. Jesus is in the temple at this point, and he goes and stands directly opposed to the treasury. Now, the treasury would have looked like in those days, they didn't have offering plates like what we have. It would have been like a big brass horn. And the rich folks would cast their money into those brass horns or brass trumpets, and it would make a loud clanging noise, click, 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 and go into the box that was down below. Okay? Jesus is looking and watching what's going on here. And there was this woman that's casting in at the same time that these rich folks were casting in. And she threw in 2 mites, which equal a farthing. And like I say, a day's wages was a denarius. And from what I understand, it took about 64 of these farthings to make a denarius. So she had about a 64th of a day's wages here that she was casting in. And what Jesus says is she cast in everything that she had. Okay? So this is what true religion looks like. Now, if Jesus had not pointed this woman out, who do you think the disciples would have went away thinking about as they were watching the treasury? The loud clanging of all of the money going into the box? Or would they have seen this poor widow woman giving in her 2 mites? Well, I don't know about you, but I probably would have saw those guys throwing in the big money, the big bucks, right? That's where our mind goes. That's where our thinking always goes. But not Jesus, all right? Jesus points to us what true religion is. Now, this, brothers and sisters, should blow our minds. This should make us so happy to be serving the God that we serve. Because no other gods, there's no other religion that teaches it like Jesus does about giving. Most of them is in the how much that you give. Even prosperity gospel and all of that kind of stuff, that's all talking about the amount that you could write your check for. That is not what God is considering at all in what we're giving. Okay? He doesn't ask us to give what we don't have. He always asks us to give what we do have. And what we do have, what he asks for up front is 10%, right? Our tithe. This goes back further than the Mosaic law. This goes all the way back to Abraham, whenever Abraham gave a tenth of everything that he had to Melchizedek. Okay, so this precedes the law, and so this is still part of what we do today, is we still give, we use the tenth as kind of a, to show how much that we should give. So 10%, it doesn't matter if you make $1,000 or $1 million, 10% across the board. And so it makes it equal for each and every one of us as we look to give, okay? And if you make $10, that's $1, okay, is the way that the math works out there. And then if you make $100, how much is it? That's right, $10, okay? 1,000 would be 100. Pretty easy math too, isn't it? All right, so we could probably go on up from there. And that's the way that we should look to give, is that the very first, right off the top, what belongs to God is 10% of everything that we have. And that's what we should be looking to give. If you're not there, start. See what God can do. I put it to the test and see if you're not better off next month as you are this month when you start giving like this. You're not even going to believe it. You're going to think that what I'm saying is crazy talk for you to give 10% of what you have. But I'm going to tell you something. God has truly blessed in our giving, and we're above a tithe now, but God is always blessed in everything that we've ever decided to give to him, and it's amazing, and it'll be amazing to you as well. And I tell you what, if you are part of Green Mountain Missionary Baptist Church and you're not giving 10%, you're missing out on a blessing, is what you're doing. You're missing out on what God can do. And I ask you to start trying to do that. Again, it's about the fairest way for giving. And God's not looking at the amount that you give. He's looking at the percentage that you give. Okay, so if you have $1 million, but you write a check for 10,000, that might look good in comparison to what I give. But brothers and sisters, God's not concerned about that, and that's what we see here. These guys are giving out of the abundance of what they have. In other words, all that they're giving, it doesn't hurt a bit. They're not seeing a bit out of their budget for doing what they're doing. But this widow woman, whenever she gave, she went above a tenth, didn't she? How much did she give? That's right, 100%. Could you imagine doing that? Just writing a check for whatever you make or whatever you have. Everything that you have in your bank account right now. What if God required that of you? What if he just came down, sent a letter down, and it said, "Dear Brian Tier, this is God Almighty, and I want you to cut a check for everything that you have and put it in the plate." Would I be willing to do that? That's a question for myself to answer and for you to answer as well. Hopefully, we would be more than willing to do that, okay? Because he's not requiring more than what we have. He's just requiring what we do have. And here, she felt led to give everything that she had. And there's going to be times and places where you're going to feel led to give everything that you have. I wonder if God could still take care of you anyway. Try it and see. Try it and see. See what he does. Okay? Might make a little difference in not just your life, but in everybody's life, in our missionary's life, in my life, in our church's life. Boy, what a great thing that is to have people that would be willing to give everything that they have. I was just listening to a sermon earlier today, and it was talking about Elisha and how Elisha was plowing with those 12 pairs of oxen. Do you remember that? And Elijah came and threw his mantle over Elisha, and he says, "I want you to come with me and serve me." And Elisha looked at him, and he had those 12 yoke of oxen. So you know that the boy was doing quite well. Having 12 yoke of oxen would have been a pretty good indication that he had some pretty good status there. And what Elisha said is, he says, "Let me go and kiss my father and mother, and I'll come right along with you." And what that lets us know is that whenever God calls us, there's going to be some things that we're going to have to kiss goodbye. And he left the 12 yoke of oxen, and he went and followed Elijah from then on. But let me ask you something. Did God bless Elisha with what he did? Sure he did. Remember whenever Elijah was about to die, and he asked for a double portion of what Elijah had? And God gave it to him. God gave him a double portion. Brothers and sisters, we're looking to God for different things in our life and different things that we want God to do in our lives, but we're not willing to sacrifice anything. We're not willing to kiss anything goodbye. We want God to kiss everything goodbye, but we don't want to kiss anything goodbye for Him. Maybe it's time for us to start laying it on the line here, like this widow woman. I don't know that she knew what she was going to eat tomorrow. Most of us, we do know what we're going to eat tomorrow, but we'd still be afraid to give what we have. We're okay with giving a portion here and a portion there and doing a little bit here to just get by. And if that's what you want, then that's what you're going to get. The Bible talks about sowing and reaping, and if you want to sow a little bit, then all you're going to get is a little bit. If you want to sow a lot, then you're going to gain a lot. And so this is the idea behind the giving here. I'm going to guess that this woman had it, that the Lord took care of her, though, don't you? On the next day, whether He took care of her here on this earth or He took care of her in heaven. This woman was taken care of and will be taken care of for all eternity. You know, out of all these rich people, we don't know who these guys are, but one of the people that we do know is this widow woman. And there's several widows in the Bible that we know about because of their giving. We should also have that same kind of heart, that same kind of deal, that we hold to this world so loosely that it's not that we don't have things in this world, but hold to those things so loosely that if God asks for them, it's just like, yeah, absolutely. Here you go. You can have it. But we hold to this world so tightly. And that was the second part of that James passage here that we looked at to begin with, where it says, "And keep himself unspotted from the world." A lot of us are spotted from this world. We're holding so tightly to this world that we cannot do anything for God. We're holding to our home so tightly. We're holding to this one so tightly and that one so tightly. We're holding on to this account so tightly. We're holding on to whatever that it may be. Just fill in the blank. We're holding on to those things so tightly that if God asks us to move or God asks us to do something, we couldn't turn loose from it. But for this widow woman, she is willing to throw it all in, put it all out there. Are we willing to put it all out there for pure religion, true religion? I guess it's no wonder that people think that religion is not much pumpkin these days. It's because there's not very many religious people out there that are truly religious, that are truly pure. Because we all hold on to, I won't say we all, I'll just say that sometimes we hold on to things tighter than we should in this old world. And we need to learn how to let go, to kiss those things goodbye for the sake of the Lord and what He wants us to do. You say, boy, that just seems so hard, so sacrificing. If it does, then we don't have the right mindset to begin with. We obviously don't understand that the love of Christ isn't constraining us. It's something else that's constraining us to try to do good. And that's not the way that it should be. He wants us to be cheerful givers. Cheerful givers. So as I look at this, I see that false religion does things in a way that they love to be seen, they want to be recognized, they have selfish motives behind them, and they give out of an abundance. For true religion, they're not looking for recognition. This widow woman, other than Jesus, would not have been recognized out of the group. They are unselfish. They give out of the heart. And they give help to those that are in need. Because this is the reason, this is one of the things that God was getting on to the scribes about, is the widows were, their houses were being devoured by them. Because they were so willing to give. They were the ones that had the willing hearts. As we look at this passage, I want you to think about what pure and true religion is. And I want you to look into the mirror of God's Word and see whether what you're practicing lines up with it. And I'm going to do the same thing. Let's look at it and see, what is this really saying to me? What are some things that maybe I'm doing for recognition instead of doing it for the Lord? Maybe I'm doing it, have some sort of selfish motivations about it. And maybe there's some things that you're doing that's right, that you're doing like the widow woman. Maybe you have learned to turn loose of those things in the world. And I want to thank God for you. And I know some of you have. Some of you are very, very good givers, and I appreciate that. And whether I appreciate it or not, I guess doesn't matter, but I know God appreciates it. And He knows that you give from the heart and the way that you give, and that you're willing to give whatever it takes. And I want to thank you for that. And again, I know God does too, for your faithfulness. And I want to pray for you too, that you'll remain faithful to Him. Don't give up. Don't get weary in well-doing, but continue it on and be steadfast and unmovable as we see the day of the Lord progressing. Let's look to the Lord in prayer, and we'll be dismissed from here. Father, I thank you so much for this opportunity that we've had to study another portion of your word. I pray that you would just help us to take these words and apply them to our hearts and to our lives. Father, I just ask that you would be with our church. Help us to always practice pure and true religion as you taught your disciples here. And Father, I know that it's easy to get off track, and in some ways, maybe we have. And I ask that you would forgive us of those things, and you would draw our attention to it and help us to correct those things and do them the way that you would have us to. Forgive us also for the way that we've done you so many times, and also help us to be forgiving of others as well. And it's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Thank you so much.